the job site to run the welder and the grinders and that type of thing, but certainly not according to any code that we would ever adhere to or know. So we use this method of construction where the blocks are not overlapped, right? They just go up straight in rows. We have steel coming out the top. We have each of these windows, we can see a bit of steel coming out there and this one. So there's like two pieces, and that ties it together quite well. And my daughter and I, we framed in the windows on our first day on the site, and you can see that that's what we did. So we had to have them braced because they're going to then put the steel on top. And so this ends up forming kind of the brace that's going to hold this piece of the concrete wall that goes over top of the windows. And there they're tying some of the steel that goes on there. So this is the steel that's laid down right on top of the window braces there. And then they also, inside of this is a U-block. So this block, unlike the other concrete, a U, it's hollow on the inside, so you can run steel right through the inside. And what they do when they put steel in there is they will get the welder out before we put any concrete in, and they will weld it to all the little pieces of metal that are coming out the sides, so that they're tying together all the steel to make it more earthquake proof, and it does work really well. So this ends up, you have a fairly thick layer of mortar right here, and then this is filled with mortar completely with the steel inside of it, and so you have this beam, they call it, actually goes around the entire level of the building at the top of the doors and top of the windows and ties the whole building together. And scaffolding that we use, not exactly to code, as you may have guessed already. And this, when we're working low down, it's just a lot easier just to throw a few blocks up than it is. We do have some proper scaffolding that we use when we're higher up yet, but this is one of the jobs, is mixing up the mortar and getting it into these buckets and handing it up to the guys who are trying to, fill these U blocks full of the mortar. Another job that we end up having to do on this site, when people go down and work, they kind of wonder what things they might be doing, but we have to fill. So this is the layer of blocks on top of the U blocks again, and so we end up filling each of the spaces between, and we have to make sure that they're filled right out to the edge. So when we're putting these blocks down, we only have the mortar, and then we set them adjusted, and then we fill up all the inside. So that's a job that pretty much everybody does. And then Jimmy here is using it's just a block of wood with a little piece of rebar wrapped around it, and he rubs out this spare or excess mortar from there, so that you end up getting these nice lines, kind of finishing off the concrete work between the blocks. This is the standard how mortar is made down there, and so the local folks that lived in the house right now mixing the mortar for us, and they make this little volcano. I know Ed Simon is perfectly familiar with this, as is Kathy Lovies, because we did this when we went down in 2018. You basically just take your pile of sand and add your cement to it, heat it 2 or 3 times, and from one pile to another pile, and that blends it. And then you make this volcano and you fill it full of water and you start to mix, and that's how you start to make the mortar. Another job that we do on the site, this is Praxedes, and she traveled down with us as a volunteer. I think it was her 3rd or 4th trip. She's actually learned how to take the plugs and run the wires to the plugs and then fix the plugs into the boxes. So she's doing some of the electrical work, and this is one of the things that people can learn while they're on the job site. So you can learn how to mix mortar, you can learn how to lay block, you can learn how to do various types of things. If you even want to try, you can try your hand at that. This little guy was working hard to mix our mortar, and so I just wanted to have a little picture of him. He gets involved with helping out to the community opportunity to have the school there, and so we had people out helping us every day. And this young guy he just worked his heart out, so we appreciated having their help for sure. And then it's not always going to be about work. And, sometimes there are jobs that are high up or that you just don't have enough tasks to keep all your hands busy. And so some people will sit down and play with the kids. And there's nothing wrong with taking time to play with the kids. It's the reason that we're there is to help these young people have an opportunity to move up in the world, to get an education and to, have a lot more opportunity than they would without the education. So spending a little bit of time just getting to know them and playing with them. They brought out the crayons and they're just using a block as a table. And with the kids, we had quite a few that joined in. I think at one time there was 8 or 10 kids there and 3 or 4 of the volunteers working with them. So it was good. They had a good time. This is the house that was right next door to where the school was up on the hill. And you can see it's just made, this is the whole thing, it's made of board and batten. So there's a very simple constructed house. Some of the houses in the area are made with stick and stone and mud, but this is one of the board and batten ones. And we ended up having our equipment stored within this house. So behind this wall here is where we kept our welder and our big bins full of tools, and we left them up on that job site. And they provided the water for us to be able to mix the mortar and whatnot. Plus, they were very engaged in helping out. I'm believing that at some point, these guys probably will open up a little tienda so that people who come to the school will be able to buy a snack or a drink or something like that. So that should maybe help with some income for them, because right now they're pretty poor. You can see there's our bags of cement, and the bags of cement are just being kept underneath there, so in case it rains, they don't get ruined. This is Oscar. Oscar is one of their pets, and he's molting right now, so he's not a very good-looking bird, but he was still really nice. He didn't talk too much, certainly not in English anyways. I think he said a few words in Spanish, but he's pretty ratty-looking while he's in his molt. And so this is where we were at the end of the first week. And this bush here, I mean, if you take a look at that bush, that's the same bush as this one here. So you can see how close that house is to that school. It's just right next door. So this was the weekend, and we went into Copan. And in Copan, we stayed at Hotel Pati, and then Hotel Pati it's nice to kind of dormitory kind of life that we're staying in, and staying in a nice little hotel for the weekend. It was quiet. The COVID had already started to get a little bit crazy, and while we were here, we were getting our first inklings of notes from home, people saying, "Oh, you're supposed to come back to Canada. Everyone's being recalled. You're supposed to, book your tickets and get home as soon as you can." Now, we had all had tickets already booked for 5 days from then, or 6, and so at that stage of the game, we weren't in any panic. It was, yes, we have our tickets booked and we're coming home when we can come home. And we didn't get this note from anything official. We had all registered with the Canadian government. This is one of those things that we did, is you have to travel, go to the travel.ca as part of the Global Affairs Canada website and register as a traveler overseas, so they know you're there and they can give you updates. The system was not really working very well at the beginning, and we didn't get any official word at all through those channels about coming home. It was all through social media, through contact with our friends back in Canada that said, "Hey, you really should be coming back home. Cut this trip short and come back home with us." At this stage of the game, there was one case of COVID that had come into the airport, and so our airport was closed for a few days for cleaning. What they wanted to do was open it again, and it was really quiet. And we were all very careful. We made sure we washed like crazy, but it certainly wasn't in a lockdown situation in the country yet. And there was no cases out in this area. This is the park Central. It's a central park in Copan, and it's kind of indicative of people visit a lot, and it's wonderful actually. To the right hand side, you can see and it's they have, so really quite like it. Stall, just as we're walking down the street, you can see they've got all kinds of fresh vegetables and fruit. At the restaurant where we stayed, it was interesting. While we were having our dinner, they at the restaurant put food for them in the back, and the dogs come in off the street. And in the morning they let them go. They give them a little bit of food, but then everybody who's in the restaurant is their friend, so they followed us down the street. And it was just really kind of an interesting thing to see that these people really cared about the dogs. They had pictures of dogs all over their restaurant, and it was just really great that they're taking care of the street dogs. We went out to the ruins and we saw some of actually a wild bird that they're feeding them there, so they come in. But this is not a clipped-winged bird. They fly around, they make the noise, but you can get reasonably close to them because they don't really have any predators. And just a beautiful scarlet macaw. They're kind of revered, and they have been revered. So you'll see them in all the ancient art down there as well. These are such spectacular birds. And of course, this little lizard was on the grounds in there too, and it's just really nice to be able to see all the wildlife. This is not somebody's pet. This is just out running around the forest, and I get a chance to see it. He was probably about 2 feet long, I guess, so he was a pretty good size lizard. And there's some of the ruins. So we did go back to the ruins. This is the back side of the ball court that they have down there in Kopan. And if you ever get down and have a chance to go visit the ruins, they're some of the best ruins in this part of the world for sure. And there's an uropendula, and the birds down in Honduras, there's something like 13,000 species or something like that in Honduras. If you look it up, it's just a huge number. I don't know what it is. 13,000 maybe up to lunch, but it's a lot. And so, and people do come from around the world to look at the birds in the country. And uropendula is the way it dips. It dips its head down really low and just makes this beautiful big long. And it's one of my favorite birds in that regard. It also has a nest that kind of hangs like a giant sock from the tree, and it kind of goes into this thing, and it's really a different looking nest. So after the weekend, we went back to building. They said we're supposed to only have 5 people in a vehicle, and they're starting to think about locking down, but we ended up getting there and getting some of the roof up. And you can see that they call these canaletas, and they're basically thin channels. And what they do is they will make the channel into a box by putting 2 channels together and welding them along the seam. And they'll create these boxes, and then they put them in place. So you got the vertical in here, and this one is tacked to it, and then they start to bring them up and connect them. And they have a really good system for going ahead and laying down. You can see the open ends of these channels here, but that's the canaletas, and that forms the roof structure. Don't forget, they're never going to have any snow load or anything on these. They'll have some rain and they'll have some wind load, but basically that's it. So they don't have to be spaced according to the same type of codes that we have up here in Canada. We took this picture of Laura, and this was kind of like one of these, everyone's on lockdown, and so we thought we'd share that one because it looks like, and this is just the standard window that we use in these buildings. So there's no glass, right? We don't use any glass. So it's basically has a nice framework of like a 1-inch steel tube, and then they spot welded this grate to it, and then what we do is we have drilled holes in the sides of the windows, and we put in bits of rebar that are then cemented in and then welded to this. Those end up being welded in place. And they're very nice actually in the school. You have a breeze that'll be coming through there. Rain getting in very often. The rain would have to be coming in very horizontal to actually get in there because there's this overhang on the building. And this is actually our last day of construction. This is how we left the school, and this was a challenge for a lot of us because everybody wanted to finish. We had just this back quarter, so the whole roof was done with the structure except for this back quarter where Jimmy's standing on the ladder. And we had to finish running the wire, and then we had to just put the sheet metal up. And then the sheet metal only takes half a day. This school was left with kind of like needing one more day of construction to just kind of basically get the school finished. We'd still have to, do the cement on the floor and that sort of thing, so more finishing. But the basic structure of the school would have been finished with one more day's work, and we just weren't able to get it done before they pretty much locked down the country. And this is what happened in the community where we were at. In some places, they would, drill a hole in the middle of the road and sink a pole in there, put a gate on one side so that you only had room to get one vehicle through, and they would control that. So they were pretty serious about locking down the country, and made it so that it was very hard for things to happen. And for us on lockdown, we didn't know what to do. There wasn't really much we could do in our compound. We took some hikes. We chopped down some local coconuts. So there's my daughter with the coconut. I think it's the first time she's had a chance to drink the coconut water directly from the coconut. And if you haven't done that, it's a real treat. I find it very, very good for you. And it's just one of those things that we were able to do. On one of the walks, we found this is actually coffee, believe it or not. And what this is the pit of a coffee cherry. And you can see that it's dark. So it's just actually the husk on the outside of where the bean would be. So when you split this dark husk, you will get a couple of white pieces on the inside. And each of those white pieces is actually a coffee bean. And so once it's dried out this way, they'll be kind of rubbing it a lot and kind of beating it, and they'll try to remove the outside husk so that you're left with the white beans. The white beans get dried, and then they get shipped up usually to North America or wherever they're going to ship the beans to, and they're roasted usually. So most of the beans that get exported, they get shipped out kind of in their raw state. So basically like this, except without this husk on it, and the beans are split. Salva-vida. So the salva-vida is a lifesaver, and it was a wonderful thing to be able to go, once a day we'd walk down to Mario's, and we would enjoy a nice, bottle of beer. I think this one actually is a liter. It's a pretty good sized beer. You can see it's quite large. This is just down at Mario's, down the street. So we were still able to walk just outside the gate and down the road a tiny bit. We would go to Mario's. And we'd be washing like crazy still at this stage of the game. But we had been there for our time, and there's no cases in the area or even anywhere near our area. And so, once we had passed our 2 weeks of being in the country, we knew that none of us brought anything down with us, which was incredibly important. This would be one of the most horrible feelings in the world, down with us and contaminated this community. People would our actions, and that's just something that that would be very, very hard to. So we kind of all breathed a sigh of relief once we all reached our 2 week mark. Carriers bringing it in. So if we got it down here, and that would be really rare because we're very isolated, they would be somehow picking it up from somebody local that ended up getting from somebody else. That was an important juncture. This is something else that we learned. We watched them make some, and I'll show you in a second how this works. That is an old bicycle wheel, and you can see there's some little string or rope that kind of goes around that wheel and goes to these two bearings or pulleys, I guess, that used to be bicycle parts as well. And they use this to make rope, actually string. So what they have is a big bundle of threads that they come and they tie those bundles together, and then they wrap it around that wheel, and he's spinning threads are all spun, then those two strings, as this person walks back, those two strings will create string. And so they're making this string from threads, and then they turn around and they weave those into hammocks. So it's very much kind of starting from scratch with very, very simple pieces of equipment, creating something that's wonderful. And I think they probably sold about 8 hammocks, I guess, to the people on our trip. Something else that there is we learned how to make the tortillas. And this is Laura. She's patting one out on a piece of plastic just on the countertop, and then cooking it over on the plancha. And the plancha is part of that Lorena stove that we looked at earlier. And this was the day that we finally had a chance for people to leave. And generally, this picture is taken in front of a completed school. And so this was kind of like a challenge for everybody. One of the things is, we had 4 flights come home after 2 weeks. And our first flight was canceled. We were all going home on Air Mexico, and that flight on that Saturday was canceled. And then it was just a huge challenge with poor communications and whatnot to try and book new flights. And so after this failed attempt here with Air Mexico, the next thing we ended up asking our travel agent in Canada to book us another flight. She got us one on United Airlines, and within 24 hours that was canceled too. And of course, that they were keeping your money, and you would get a credit for your flight that would last a year or longer. And this is quite common right now with airlines around the world that they're doing this. United switched after and kind of said, no, we'll cancel that, so that there was no charge. So I don't have a credit with them. I still have my credit with Air Mexico. But the travel agent just had a nightmare. I mean, they're not really supposed to be in their offices back in Canada. And, when you think about how much they make, they get the 5% of a flight value or something. It's like they're going to get $50 or something per person. And this is only once, right? And if the flight gets canceled, they get nothing. So this was a real challenge for the travel agent, and we decided that we were going to work directly with the airline companies after that point. And so our next booking was made with Copa Airlines. We went directly to Copa on that. Copa's out of Panama, and they ended up canceling that flight on us after a couple of days as well. So the flights are getting harder and harder to get out of here. And with closures of various countries, and so we had a closure of our local airport, people out, and also closures of airlines because their country that they function out of closed down. So that's what happened with Air Mexico. It's what happened with Copa out of Panama. United, that flight was canceled because the airport was shut down. And so everyone was talking about these repatriation flights coming into Honduras to fetch Canadians home, and it's like, yeah, it's really great, but here's the reality. Everyone came in to pick people up that had already dropped them off. And so the only place in Honduras that Canadian carriers could come to, and that's like Air Transat, Sunwing, and WestJet, they could come into Roatan, which is the diving destination. They never made it to the mainland of Honduras, and so if we ever wanted to get on one of those flights, we had to somehow find a way to get down to the airport or to the coast, and then get over, which was a huge challenge. And so our local consul was in touch with us. We were in pretty constant communication with the local embassy people from the government of Canada, and Mike Obrist was working feverishly to try and get us a direct flight so that we could go directly from the airport back to Canada. And it never did happen that we could get one of these direct flights. And as options became fewer and fewer, more and more people said, look, we really have to get out and take whatever option we can. And so there was, I think, 7 people that in this day And I elected not to go on that trip because I have a little bit of asthma and I didn't want to go through the States, through Texas is where they had to go through. They had to do 24 hours in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the overall trip home was like 36 hours or something. So it was a very long time, and a lot of that was through the States, and Texas at the time was not really doing any social distancing or having things closed down. Not go and wait. So this was already a week after the time that we were supposed to be home, and there was very few options left. But after these guys made it to the airport and we were home feeling kind of almost abandoned, we heard from the government at that stage that they did have a flight booked for us for Monday, and that was going to be on Air Transat flying from the island. So the government then ended up arranging for a charter flight. So we had to get a special pass to be on the roads for everybody. And that was a matter of having our guy go to the police station and talk with them to get this safe passage document. And that was a challenge as well, because even when the driver came back from dropping this bunch at the airport, empty car at that stage of the game and shouldn't have been on the road. And the police gave him a hard time. He was detained for like 5 hours before he could finally get back to us. And we ended up having to contact the mayor, and the mayor contacted the chief of police and whatnot, and to try and make sure that we could travel. So the day that we did leave was on the Monday, and that's when the last of us managed to go down. We had to leave at 4:30 in the morning to get to the airport to catch a charter. The charter left at around 8:30, I guess, to head to Roatan. And Roatan's closed because they don't have any cases of COVID on the island, and they wanted to keep it that way. So you weren't allowed into the airport in Roatan. So we caught the charter over there, and then we sat under tents on the tarmac. They collected our passports and took them into the immigration office and had them stamped, and then they returned them to us. The mayor felt bad because they weren't letting us onto the island in a legal standpoint, so not even into the airport proper, right? Just on the tarmac in front of the airport. And at that stage of the game, he felt bad about it. He brought us some pizza. But it was one of those spots where I had never been to the island of Roatan in all my years going to Honduras. 20 some years I've been doing this now, and this was the first time I set foot on Roatan, and it wasn't to go skiing. And it's really, really unfortunate. But anyway, so they fed us some pizza, and we were able to, at that stage, jump on this Air Transat flight. And you can see Roatan here, and this is why Roatan is so famous, is that this is kind of like forming the Big Barrier Reef, and on this side of the reef, on the landward side, you have lots of sand, and there's some bits of reef in there and some seaweed, and a channel that comes in here that's kind of quite protected, so where you can, the boats and whatnot. But all along this side, where you can see these waves and all that brown stuff is the coral, and then it drops off nice and deep dark blue here. So it's a spectacular spot. It's like one of the probably one of the 5 best places in the world to go scuba diving. It's got a very, very high ranking, along with the big reef off Belize and the Great Barrier Reef. This is right up there as one of them. Hopefully someday I will have a chance to make it back. So that's basically our story. It was such a challenge to not know where and when we would be getting home. So when we flew into Canada, we ended up having to fly into Montreal, and the decision was made. My daughter's boyfriend felt kind of, I guess, powerless, felt like helpless, wanted to be able to do something, anything to be able to help us out. People had been contacting MPs on our behalf, Global Affairs Canada, the press. I think we had some people who were on CTV News because we had some Boy Scouts with us that were trapped down there away from their parents. So there was a lot of people helping out. He wasn't able to really do much. But anyway, so he came to Montreal to pick us up. And people said, well, that's not necessarily the best thing. However, coming to Montreal to pick us up, it made it better for us in terms of contact locally. Montreal was a hotspot for COVID, still kind of is. But what we found was once we were out of there, we would have had to take a cab to go to a hotel, stay in a hotel overnight, take a cab back to the airport, so we're in the airport again, and then on another airplane, and then on another airport in Toronto, and then get into a car and come home. And we could simply just skip all that stuff in the middle and just get into a car and come home from Montreal. And so that's what we did. He came down. He was going to be isolating, doing quarantine with my daughter anyways, and so he managed to kind of come down, had a 6.5-hour drive by himself to get there, and then we took, I think, probably 7 hours to get home, and got home at 4:30 in the morning and went directly into quarantine. So that's kind of the story about how that worked. I have a question from Karen, so if anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat box. You just click on the chat at the bottom of the window, I guess, if you're using this. She said, well, I guess you have to actually give your question to Everton, and he types it in. Do you think this kind of help to countries such as Honduras will be negatively impacted in the future? I think, well, all the situations around the world right now are being impacted because of lockdowns. And with lockdowns, we have problems with food distribution. So, I mean, one of the things is we knew that there was food, produce, fruit and vegetables that was rotting. It's either rotting in the field or rotting in a truck. Maybe somebody that harvested it can't get it to market. And if you could get it to market, the people who would come to market ordinarily to buy it weren't able to go to market either. So what you're seeing there is you're seeing people suffering. You're seeing food going to waste. And then people also that have seed and they have grains. So you take a look at your beans, the very, very best bowl full of beans when they harvest them, when they pick through them, they take the pristine, the most beautiful, untouched, and that's the seed that you're going to throw in the dirt next year and hope and pray that you have good weather and you're going to get a harvest from it. So the very, very best is what you gamble your life with, and all the pieces that are broken and chipped and cracked and scratched, that's the food. That's the part we eat. And it's quite different than what we do up here. It seems like everything that we want to eat is all the perfect stuff, and what goes to waste is the stuff that's marked up. Now, I don't know how things go. I know that our partner down in Honduras, Al Wygood, who is the guy that's the volunteer that's been running it. I brought him to the club one time. Al turned 90 this January and is still laying lockdown there. And he decided to stay in Honduras because it's pretty isolated where he's at. He would have had to come home and be kind of like locked up in a much smaller space in cold, and actually the travel. At the age of 90, I'm not sure you really wanted to do it. So that was. Is it going to be impacted in the future? It's going to be a while before we're able to travel again. So I don't know the answer, but I suspect yes. I mean, there's the global food systems, global food security are going to be impacted quite a bit. And I think you're already seeing that there are things that we have a hard time, and that we have challenges getting here as well. Dave Forwell says, nothing wrong with being in Dallas-Fort Worth, just saying. I get you, Dave. I know that Dallas-Fort Worth is nice. I don't know. It was kind of scary, I think, for the people that were there. It was kind of like a ghost town, I guess, when they went through. They ended up having to, get delivery, I guess. They had delivery pizza come through Dallas in the town when they went to their hotel. But for myself, we just don't know. We don't have any idea, what the situation is like on the ground in the various countries and whatnot when we're down there trying to make decisions about whether we're going to come home or whether we're going to stay and what we're going to bet on. If you're going to bet on waiting for the government to come through with a flight for you, which is what the three of us did, and we were happy with it in the end for sure. But it was the very last flight out. There was no more. And, Mike Obrist, the Canadian consul, what a guy. I mean, he worked really hard. He had sent his wife and kids home 3 weeks earlier back to Montreal, which is where they're from. And he was staying in Honduras to look after Canadians down there, separated from his family for, it would probably be at least another month or 2 months. So I have nothing but great things to say about the people working for the Canadian government looking after the travelers down south. So anyways, I guess there's no other questions right now, so I'll just wrap that up for the time being. We have a possibility of maybe doing these things again if Unitarians want to go down and participate, so you have a better idea a little bit of the exact kind of work that's going on down there. This is a very unusual circumstance as far as travel goes and the COVID, so we'll see what happens in the future. But for now, everything is kind of, and the school hasn't been out since we left it. And so back on they have the material, they have the money to pay for manpower to finish the job. But I think most people on our trip would like to go back and build another school so they could get that sense of completion. We all felt a little bit of a lack there. So anyways, thank you all very much. And if you do have any questions, just fire me off an email, or you can we can get together and have a discussion on Zoom or something like that. But anyways, I hope you guys take care. And I'm going to stop now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Nice to hear about your story. I was worried about you before. It was and we look forward to your chocolate presentation in hopefully a couple more weeks. Anyways, take care, and if there's nothing else for
next week, Zoom.
Next week we are doing Zoom. I think Everton decided after today that we're going to do Zoom next week, so we will send out the information for everyone to log into Zoom for next Wednesday. And if anybody has any questions between now and then, to let Everton know.
Troy asked, who's doing 50-50?
Oh, 50-50, yeah. I don't know. Anyways, if there's nothing else for the Greater Rotary, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.